Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead as he crawled through the maintenance tunnel beneath Orbital Research Station Harmony. The metal walls pressed close around him, and the air smelled of oil and recycled oxygen. His toolbox scraped against the floor as he moved toward the broken coolant pipe that had been giving the engineering team headaches for 3 days. The pipe was located in one of the narrow corridors where the human and alien sections of the station connected. Marcus had been working on the space station for 2 years now, but he still felt amazed every time he saw aliens walking around like it was normal. Today he needed to fix this pipe before the temperature controls failed in the alien quarters. As Marcus emerged from the maintenance tunnel, he heard footsteps echoing in the corridor. Heavy boots clicked against the metal floor in a steady rhythm. He grabbed his tools and stood up, brushing dust off his blue work uniform. The footsteps were getting closer. Around the corner came one of the Valeth warriors. Marcus had seen her before, but never spoke to her. She was tall, maybe 7 feet, with pale blue skin and silver markings that looked like tattoos across her face and arms. Her armor was incredible, black metal covered in swirling patterns that seemed to move in the light. The armor covered her shoulders, chest, and arms, leaving her face visible. Her eyes were large and golden, and her hair was white as snow, braided with small metal beads. The corridor was barely wide enough for 2 humans to pass each other. For a human and a Valeth warrior in full armor, it was going to be tight. Marcus pressed himself against the wall and waited for her to pass. She walked with purpose, her golden eyes focused straight ahead. The armor made soft clicking sounds as she moved. Marcus had always wondered how heavy that stuff was. The patterns on her armor caught the light from the ceiling and seemed to glow. As she came closer, Marcus realized he might not have enough room. The coolant pipe stuck out from the wall where he had been working on it, making the space even smaller. He pressed harder against the wall, holding his toolbox tight against his chest. The Valeth warrior, her name was Kira, he remembered hearing someone say, tried to squeeze past him. Her armor was wider than Marcus had thought. As she moved by, the intricate patterns on her shoulder armor brushed against his arm. The moment his skin touched the metal patterns, everything changed. Kira stopped moving instantly. Her whole body went rigid like someone had turned her into a statue. Her golden eyes went wide and her mouth opened slightly. She stared at Marcus with an expression he had never seen on any alien face before: shock, fear, and something else he could not identify. Marcus looked down at his arm where her armor had touched him. He did not see anything wrong. No cuts, no burns, nothing. Just a slight tingling sensation where the metal had brushed his skin. "I am sorry," Marcus said quickly, thinking he had somehow hurt her. "The corridor is so narrow, and I was working on the pipe, and I did not mean to bump into you." Kira continued to stare at him. Her breathing became faster and shallow. The metal beads in her hair clinked softly as she trembled. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. Finally, Kira spoke. Her voice was deeper than a human woman's voice, with an accent that made some words sound musical. But her words came out broken and uncertain. "Do you know what that means?" Marcus blinked. "What do you mean?" "The touching." Kira's golden eyes never left his face. "The armor touching. Do you know what that means?" "I do not understand," Marcus said honestly. "It was an accident. The corridor is too narrow, and I was trying to get out of your way." Kira's expression changed again. Now she looked confused and maybe a little scared. She glanced down at her shoulder armor where Marcus had touched it, then back at his face. "You do not know," she said, and it was not a question. "Know what?" Marcus asked. He was starting to feel worried. Had he broken some alien rule he did not know about? Had he insulted her somehow? The last thing the station needed was another diplomatic incident. But instead of answering, Kira suddenly stepped back from him. Her movements were quick and jerky, not like the smooth confidence she had shown before. She looked around the corridor like she was checking to see if anyone else was there. "This is not good," she said, more to herself than to Marcus. "This is very not good." "Wait," Marcus said, reaching out toward her but stopping when she flinched away from his hand. "What is wrong? Can you tell me what I did wrong? I can fix it somehow." Kira shook her head rapidly. "You cannot fix this. Nobody can fix this now." With those words, she turned and walked quickly away from him. Her heavy boots echoed in the corridor as she moved faster than Marcus had ever seen a Valeth move. Within seconds, she disappeared around the corner, leaving Marcus standing alone with his toolbox and a growing sense that something very important had just happened. Marcus looked down at his arm again. Still nothing there except the fading tingling sensation. He had touched alien armor by accident. How bad could that be? Over the next few hours, Marcus began to get his answer. Other Valeth on the station started acting strange around him. Some would stop and stare when they saw him in the corridors. Others would quickly look away and hurry past him. A few made small bowing motions with their heads when they passed him, which had never happened before. The strangest reaction came from a group of Valeth workers in the cafeteria. When Marcus walked in to get lunch, they all stopped talking and looked at him. One of them said something in their own language, and the others made a sound that might have been gasping. They gathered their food and left the cafeteria quickly, glancing back at Marcus as they went. Marcus sat alone at his usual table, eating his sandwich and trying to figure out what was happening. He had worked alongside aliens for 2 years without any major problems. He had always been careful to be respectful and follow the basic rules everyone learned during orientation. Do not touch anyone without permission. Do not make loud noises around the quiet ones. Do not eat meat in front of the plant people. Simple stuff. But nobody had ever told him anything special about Valeth armor. By the end of his shift, Marcus was sure of one thing. He had made a big mistake somehow, and he needed to find out what it was before it got worse. The question was, who could he ask, and would they tell him the truth about what touching Kira's armor really meant? Marcus spent the night tossing and turning in his small quarters, thinking about golden eyes and strange reactions. When morning came, he knew he needed answers. The only person on the station who might help him was Dr. Elena Ross, the xenocultural specialist who worked in the research section. Elena had been studying alien cultures for 15 years. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes who always wore colorful scarves from different worlds. Her office was filled with alien artifacts, books, and pictures from a dozen different species. If anyone could explain what had happened with Kira's armor, it would be Elena. Marcus found her office just as she was starting her morning coffee. The smell filled the small space, mixing with the scent of some alien incense burning in the corner. "Marcus," Elena said with surprise, "what brings you here so early? Did something happen with the environmental systems?" "Not exactly," Marcus said, sitting in the chair across from her desk. "I need to ask you about Valeth culture." Elena raised her eyebrows. "That is unusual. Most maintenance staff do not worry much about cultural details." "What happened?" Marcus told her everything: the narrow corridor, the accidental touch, Kira's strange reaction, and how other Valeth had been acting around him since. Elena listened carefully, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When Marcus finished, Elena was quiet for a long moment. She sipped her coffee and stared at something on her desk that Marcus could not see. "Oh dear," she finally said. "That does not sound good." Elena stood up and walked to one of her bookshelves. She pulled out a thick volume with Valeth writing on the cover and flipped through the pages quickly. "Marcus, what you described, touching the shoulder armor in that specific way, it is not just touching armor. In Valeth culture, those patterns on their armor are sacred. They tell the story of the warrior's family, their achievements, their place in society." "Okay," Marcus said slowly. "So I touched something important. That is bad, but I can apologize, right?" Elena shook her head. "It is more complicated than that. When you touch those specific patterns on a Valeth warrior's shoulder armor, you are not just touching metal. You are performing what they call the challenge of intent." Marcus felt his stomach sink. "Challenge of what?" "It is an ancient ritual," Elena said, reading from her book. "When someone touches a Valeth warrior's armor in that pattern, it means one of two things. Either you are challenging them to combat, or you are declaring your intention to court them." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the chest. "Court them, you mean like dating, like marriage?" "Exactly like that. The Valeth take these rituals very seriously. According to their laws, once the challenge of intent has been made, it cannot be ignored. The person who was touched must respond." Marcus put his head in his hands. "Elena, I was just trying to fix a pipe. I do not want to fight anyone, and I definitely do not want to marry anyone I barely know." "I understand that," Elena said gently. "But the Valeth do not see it that way. To them, intent does not matter. Only the action matters. You performed their ritual, even by accident. So what happens now?" Elena looked back at her book. "According to Valeth law, Kira has 3 choices. She can accept your challenge to combat, in which case you would fight until one of you dies. She can accept your courtship declaration, in which case you would have to complete 3 trials to prove your worthiness. Or she can reject both options, which would bring great shame to both of your peoples and could end the alliance between humans and Valeth." Marcus stared at Elena. "You are joking." "I wish I was. The Valeth are very proud people, Marcus. Their honor codes have kept their society stable for thousands of years. They do not make exceptions, even for accidents." Before Marcus could respond, Elena's communication device beeped. She answered it quickly. "Dr. Ross here." "Yes, I see." "Yes, he is with me now. We will be right there." She turned to Marcus with a worried expression. "That was Captain Blake. The Valeth Council has requested an emergency meeting. They want to see both of us immediately." The walk to the council chambers felt like the longest of Marcus's life. Other humans and aliens in the corridors stared at them as they passed. Word was spreading quickly through the station. The Valeth Council met in a large circular room with high ceilings and walls covered in metal artwork that looked similar to the patterns on their armor. 5 Valeth elders sat in tall chairs arranged in a semicircle. In the center was Elder Thane, the oldest Valeth on the station and their chief representative. Elder Thane was ancient even by Valeth standards. His blue skin was darker than the younger Valeth, and his silver markings were more elaborate. He wore robes instead of armor, but the patterns on his clothes were just as intricate. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. "Human Marcus," Elder Thane said formally, "you have performed the challenge of intent upon warrior Kira. Do you understand the significance of your actions?" Marcus looked at Elena, who nodded encouragingly. "I understand now, Elder Thane. But it was an accident. I did not know about your customs." "Intent is not relevant," Elder Thane replied. "The ritual has been performed. Warrior Kira must now choose her response according to our laws." "What if I refuse to participate?" Marcus asked. "What if I just say no to the whole thing?" The other elders whispered among themselves in their own language. Elder Thane raised his hand for silence. "Refusal is not possible. If you do not honor the challenge of intent, it will be seen as an insult to all Valeth people. The alliance between our species would be broken. Your people and mine would become enemies." Captain Blake, who had been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. "Elder Thane, surely we can find another solution. Marcus is a valued member of our crew, but he is not a warrior or a diplomat. This was truly an accident." "The law does not recognize accidents," Elder Thane said firmly. "However, I will give the human time to consider his options. Warrior Kira will present her choice tomorrow at the same time. Until then, both parties will remain on the station." As they left the council chamber, Marcus felt like the walls were closing in around him. In less than 24 hours, he would learn whether he was going to fight a 7-foot alien warrior to the death, attempt to court someone he barely knew, or accidentally start an interstellar war. Elena put her hand on his shoulder as they walked back toward her office. "We will find a solution, Marcus. Humans are good at solving impossible problems. We just need to think of something the Valeth have never considered before." Marcus hoped she was right. But right now, he could not imagine what that solution might be. Marcus spent most of the night walking around the observation deck, looking out at the stars and trying to think of a solution that would not end with him dead or married to someone he did not know. The more he thought about it, the more frustrated he became. The Valeth had their ancient laws and their honor codes, but what about what people actually wanted? What about choice? What about talking to each other like normal beings instead of following rules that were thousands of years old? By morning, Marcus had made a decision. It was probably crazy, and Elena would probably try to talk him out of it, but it felt right. Instead of choosing between the 2 options the Valeth had given him, he was going to do something very human. He was going to ask Kira what she wanted. When Marcus found Elena in her office, she was surrounded by books and papers, looking like she had not slept all night. "I have been researching all night," she said without looking up. "There might be a loophole in the courtship trials. If you can prove that you are not physically capable of completing them, the Valeth might consider the challenge void." "Elena," Marcus said, sitting down across from her. "I want to talk to Kira." Elena finally looked up from her papers. "Talk to her about what?" "About what she wants. About what she thinks we should do. The Valeth keep talking about their laws and their honor, but nobody has asked Kira how she feels about any of this. Marcus, that is not how Valeth culture works. Individual desires are less important than following proper procedures. Asking her opinion might actually make things worse." "Maybe," Marcus said. "But it is the human thing to do. And right now, being human is all I have." Elena stared at him for a long moment. "You want to request a private meeting with her?" "Yes." "Before the council makes their decision?" "Yes." Elena shook her head slowly. "They will think you are trying to influence her choice improperly. It could be seen as another insult. Or," Marcus said, "it could be seen as someone trying to understand the situation better before making important decisions. Elena, what is the worst thing that could happen if I talk to her?" "The same worst things that could happen anyway. Death, marriage, or interstellar war. Then I have nothing to lose." 2 hours later, Marcus stood outside the door to Kira's quarters in the Valeth section of the station. Elder Thane had been surprised by his request, but had agreed to allow the meeting. Maybe the Elder was curious to see what the human would do. Marcus pressed the door chime and waited. After a few moments, the door slid open. Kira stood there without her armor for the first time since Marcus had seen her. She wore simple gray clothes that looked comfortable and practical. Without the armor, she looked younger and smaller, though still much taller than Marcus. Her white hair was loose around her shoulders instead of braided, and her golden eyes looked tired. "You asked to speak with me," she said formally. "Yes." "May I come in?" Kira stepped aside and gestured for him to enter. Her quarters were larger than his, but simply furnished. The walls were decorated with weapons and what looked like family pictures. There were no chairs designed for humans, so they both remained standing. "I wanted to ask you something," Marcus said, "and I hope you will give me an honest answer." Kira crossed her arms over her chest. "Ask. What do you want to happen tomorrow when the council meets and you have to make your choice? What do you actually want to choose?" Kira stared at him. "That is not how this works. I know it is not how it usually works. But I am asking anyway. Not as part of any ritual or law. Just as one person asking another person what they want." For a long moment, Kira said nothing. She walked to one of the pictures on her wall and looked at it. Marcus could see it showed several Valeth in ceremonial armor, probably her family. "You really do not understand our ways," she said finally. "No, I do not. But I am trying to understand. That is why I am here." Kira turned back to face him. "What I want does not matter. I have duties, responsibilities, honor to uphold." "But if it did matter," Marcus pressed gently, "if you could choose anything at all, what would you choose?" Kira's expression changed. For just a moment, the formal mask slipped and Marcus saw something else underneath, uncertainty, maybe even fear. "I am already promised to another," she said quietly. "Warrior Drex of the Northern Houses. Our families arranged the match when we were children. The ceremony will happen when we return to our homeworld." Marcus felt a surge of relief, followed immediately by concern. "So you are engaged?" "In your terms, yes. But the challenge of intent you performed takes priority over previous arrangements. If I accept your courtship challenge, my engagement to Drex would be broken. If I choose combat instead, and you somehow defeat me, the same result occurs. And if you reject both options, then I bring shame to my family, my house, and my people. The alliance between humans and Valeth would be damaged, possibly destroyed. Many would suffer for my failure to handle this situation properly." Marcus began to understand the impossible position Kira was in. "So no matter what you choose, someone gets hurt?" "Yes." "What about what you want? Though forget about duty and honor and politics for a minute. If you could wave a magic wand and make this situation anything you wanted, What would it be? Kira looked at him strangely. Magic wand. Sorry. Human expression. It means if you had unlimited power to change things. Kira was quiet for a long time. She walked to her window and looked out at the stars. I would want to understand, she said finally. Your people confuse me. You do things that make no sense by our standards, but they work. You solve problems in ways we never consider. I have watched humans on this station for months, and I do not understand how you think. Is that good or bad? I do not know. That is what I would want to understand. Marcus joined her at the window. What about Drex? Do you love him? Love is not the primary consideration in Valeth marriages. Compatibility, honor, family alliance, these things matter more. But do you love him? Kira glanced at Marcus. I barely know him. We have met perhaps 6 times in our lives. And that does not bother you. It is how things are done. Marcus shook his head. Kira, can I tell you something about humans? What? We believe that the people involved in a situation should have a say in what happens to them. We think individual choice matters. We think 2 people should decide for themselves whether they want to be together. That sounds chaotic. Sometimes it is. But it also means people are happier with their choices because they made them freely. Kira turned to face him fully. What are you suggesting? The next morning, the council chamber was more crowded than Marcus had ever seen it. Word had spread throughout the station about the emergency meeting, and representatives from several alien species had come to observe. Captain Blake stood with a human delegation, looking nervous. Elena was there too, carrying a bag full of books and notes. Elder Thane called the meeting to order with formal words in the Valeth language, then switched to the common tongue that everyone on the station understood. We are gathered to hear Warrior Kira's response to the challenge of intent performed by human Marcus. Warrior Kira, please state your choice. Kira stood in the center of the chamber wearing her full ceremonial armor. The patterns on the metal seemed to glow under the chamber's lights. She looked at Marcus, then at the assembled crowd, then back at Elder Thane. Elder Thane, honored council members, I have considered the options available to me under our law. Combat would likely result in the human's death, as he is not trained in our fighting methods. Marriage would require him to complete trials he is not prepared for and would break my existing engagement, bringing shame to 2 houses. Elder Thane nodded. These considerations are wise. What is your choice? I choose neither, Kira said clearly. A murmur went through the crowd. Several Valeth council members looked shocked. Elder Thane raised his hand for silence. Warrior Kira, you must choose one of the available options. The law requires it. The law assumes that all challenges are made with knowledge and intent, Kira replied. Human Marcus has proposed that we consider a new approach. One that honors both our peoples while acknowledging that this situation is unique. Marcus felt his heart pounding. This was the moment when his crazy idea would either work or make everything much worse. What approach do you suggest? Elder Thane asked. Marcus stepped forward. Elder Thane, with your permission, I would like to propose modified trials. Modified how? Instead of the traditional trials of combat, I propose trials of understanding. Tests that show not just physical strength, but the kind of strength that brings people together instead of driving them apart. Elder Thane looked at the other council members. They whispered among themselves in their own language for several minutes. Explain these trials you propose, Elder Thane said finally. Marcus took a deep breath. The first trial is usually about strength. Instead of fighting, let me solve a problem that helps everyone on this station. Let me show human ingenuity instead of human fighting skills. The second trial tests wisdom. Instead of reciting your laws, let me show how humans approach conflict resolution. Let me mediate a dispute using our methods. The third trial tests honor. For this one, I want to do something that has never been done before. I want to publicly acknowledge my ignorance of your customs and ask for forgiveness, while also asking to learn more about your culture as a friend, not as a potential mate. The chamber was completely silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Elder Thane spoke slowly. You propose to replace combat with problem-solving. To replace wisdom with mediation. and to replace traditional honor with humility and friendship. Yes. These are not our ways. No, they are not. But they are human ways. And if our peoples are going to be allies, maybe it is time we learn from each other instead of just following old rules. Elder Thane looked at Kira. Warrior Kira, do you accept these modified trials? I do, Elder Thane. I believe this human speaks wisdom, even if it is not wisdom our people have heard before. And if he fails these trials... Kira hesitated for just a moment. Then I will accept his challenge to combat, knowing that I will likely have to kill him. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The stakes were still life and death. Elder Thane stood up from his chair. These trials are unprecedented. But perhaps unprecedented times call for unprecedented solutions. Human Marcus, I will allow you to attempt these modified trials. You have 1 day to prepare for each trial. The first trial will begin tomorrow. The crowd began to murmur and move as the formal meeting ended, but Elder Thane was not finished. However, the elder continued, understand this clearly. If you fail any of these trials, or if your approach brings dishonor to either of our peoples, the consequences will be the same as if you had failed the traditional trials. Do you accept these terms? Marcus looked at Kira, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. I accept, Marcus said. Kira stood in the center of the council chamber, her armor gleaming under the lights. She looked at Marcus, then at Elder Thane, then at the crowd of humans and aliens who had gathered to witness this unprecedented moment. Elder Thane, she said in a clear, strong voice, Human Marcus has completed trials unlike any in our history. He has shown me something I did not expect to find. What has he shown you, Warrior Kira? He has shown me that strength can come from admitting weakness. That wisdom can come from asking questions instead of providing answers. And that honor can come from putting another person's well-being before your own traditions. Elder Thane nodded slowly. These are indeed unusual lessons. What is your response to his challenge? Kira removed her helmet and held it under her arm. Her white hair fell around her shoulders, and her golden eyes were bright with determination. I accept Human Marcus as a friend and ally. But I do not accept him as a mate, because that is not what either of us truly wants. A murmur went through the crowd. This was not one of the traditional responses. However, Kira continued, raising her voice, I believe this situation has revealed a gap in our laws. A gap that could cause problems for future generations as our peoples work more closely together. Elder Thane leaned forward in his chair. What gap do you perceive? Our laws assume that all interactions between species will follow our traditions. But Human Marcus has shown me that other species approach relationships, problems, and honor in different ways. Some of these ways have value that our laws do not recognize. Kira turned to address the full council. I request permission to create a new role in our society. A cultural guardian whose responsibility is to help prevent misunderstandings between our people and others, and to find solutions when such misunderstandings occur. The council members spoke quietly among themselves in their own language. Elder Thane listened to each of them before responding. This role does not exist in our traditions, Warrior Kira. Many things that are necessary today did not exist in our traditions, Elder Thane. When our ancestors first traveled to the stars, they had to create new traditions for living in space. When we first met other species, we had to create new traditions for diplomacy. Now that we are working closely with humans and others, perhaps we need new traditions for friendship. Elder Thane was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, the first time Marcus had ever seen a Valith elder smile. Warrior Kira, your wisdom honors both the old ways and the new possibilities. I grant your request. You will become our first cultural guardian, with the responsibility of building bridges between our people and others. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him, followed immediately by admiration for Kira's courage in choosing her own path. But Elder Thane was not finished. Human Marcus, the elder said, you have participated in trials that changed not just your fate, but the future of our peoples. What role will you take in this new tradition we are creating? Marcus had not expected this question. He looked at Captain Blake, who nodded encouragingly, then at Elena, who